Well, hello. You're very welcome. I'm so glad you're here because this story is a quiet one and a personal one. It's about a time in life that didn't feel important while it was happening. A time that, if I'm honest, I didn't really understand at all. In fact, there were moments when I questioned it. It felt confusing, uncertain at times, and even pointless. I wondered what I was doing and whether any of it meant anything. But as the years passed, something about that time stayed with me. Not clearly, not all at once, but in small pieces that seemed to return when I needed them. And eventually, I began to understand it in a different way. It began to make sense. This is the story about one of those moments in life. A moment that didn't announce itself, didn't explain itself, but changed something anyway. A year I thought meant nothing, that turned out to mean far more than I realized. There are years of a life that don't disappear and yet somehow don't quite stay, not forgotten, not hidden, just not held in the same way as the rest. You can speak of them if you need to. You can recall the places, the faces, the decisions that were made. But when you do, it is as though you are standing slightly to one side of yourself, watching a version of your life that no longer feels entirely like your own. I have come to think of them as the lost years. Not because they were wasted, but because something in them was unmoored, untethered from the person I was before and the one I would eventually become. It was during that time that I met her. Her name was Pam Ball. I didn't always hold on to it clearly, but it came back to me later, as these things sometimes do. Even now I can see her, not clearly in the way you might expect, more as a presence that has stayed with me rather than a face I could describe and be sure of. She lived in a house that didn't quite seem to belong to the street it stood on, a tall, tired Victorian place, set slightly back as though it had withdrawn from the rest of the world some years before and simply forgotten to return. The other houses in that street were well kept, nicely painted with lovely gardens. This one was actually a little bit of a mess. That was the impression when I first walked up the path to knock on the door. There were people inside, always people, children, a husband, someone older, definitely lingering quietly in the background. But the house itself held your attention more than anything else. On first entry, it smelled of things that didn't quite settle well, of time, of rooms that had not been opened properly in years, maybe. Years of life being lived but not arranged, and yet I went. More than once. I must have been pointed there by someone, though I have tried over the years to remember who, and I cannot. It's as though the path to her existed only at that moment, and then quietly closed behind me. At the time, I had very little. 2 children, a suitcase, and a life that had shifted so suddenly I could barely feel the ground beneath it. I wasn't looking for anything mystical. I wasn't searching for meaning. I was simply trying to steady myself. And somehow I found her, or perhaps she found me. She didn't greet you in the way people usually do. There was no sense of arrival, no welcome, no performance, no attempt to make you feel at ease. But, funnily enough, you did feel at ease. She would appear, talk for a while, and then disappear again, as though she moved in and out of the room according to something only she understood. Her clothes were loose, flowing, her hair unkempt, her presence entirely unconcerned with how it might be received. And yet, when she spoke, you listened. Not because she was persuasive, and not because she claimed to know anything you didn't, but because there was a steadiness in her that you didn't yet have in yourself. She didn't fix things, and she certainly didn't offer solutions in the way people would expect. What she did was quieter than that. She allowed something in you to shift. There were times sitting there when I wondered why I had come at all. Nothing she said seemed particularly remarkable. There were no revelations, no moments of sudden clarity that you could hold on to and say, there, that's it. In fact, if I'm honest, there were times when I thought, what am I doing here? I had so little as it was. What little money I had went on those visits, and I couldn't have told you then what I was getting in return. She didn't speak like someone educated in the usual way, not in polished sentences or carefully structured ideas. There was no sense she had studied anything or trained in how to guide another person. And yet there was something in her that didn't need any of that. A kind of knowing that wasn't learned and didn't ask to be explained. It was simply there. And I think now, though I couldn't have said it then, that what she offered was not answers. It was just permission. One day I remember we were speaking about money, or perhaps I was. Everything at that time seemed to circle back to what I didn't have and what I couldn't afford. I reached into my pocket and found a coin, a 25p piece. Oh, I'd like a coffee when I leave, I said, but I don't think I can afford it. It was the kind of thing you say when you've said it so often it no longer feels like a thought, just a fact. She looked at me properly then, and something in her expression shifted. Go and get your coffee. Go and spend it, she said, just like that. Just go and spend it. I must have hesitated because she added, you're not short of money in that moment. You're short of allowing yourself to have anything. Don't live a life of lack, because often it sets a pattern for you. But something shifted quietly, like a door that had always been closed. being left just slightly open. There were small things she would suggest, not instructions, more like ways of looking. One of them, other than the one about the money, has stayed with me more clearly than the rest. My life at that time felt as though it stood between two directions, not clearly marked, just a sense that I could go one way or the other. And I didn't know which was right. She didn't tell me what to do. She simply said, "Close your eyes and see it. See him on one side and on the other side what could be ahead." And I did. I saw him, not at his worst, just him. Part of the life I had known, and beside that, the other space. Not fully formed, just something ahead, something I hadn't stepped into yet, and I watched. And what I saw was this: he remained. In that new space, he remained. He did not move forward with me. But in that other side, I could feel myself moving forward. And somehow, without anyone saying it, I understood. Staying was not what I meant to do. It was such a simple thing, and yet I can still see it now as clearly as I did then. And always behind her door, when she left and closed it, there were words. At that time, I really didn't know what it was. I didn't understand them. I had not read that piece before to my knowledge, but I remember standing there each time she stepped out, trying to take them in before she returned, because the words were so amazing. I remembered at that time, I just got fragments. Peace, truth, a different way of being. I saw her like that for some time, perhaps a year. And though even that feels uncertain now, as though time moved differently then. And as these things often do, it simply ended. I just stopped going. Years passed. And then one day, much later, I found myself back in that part of Newbury. I had been gone and I've been in America for years. I can't afford to go back very often, but I was back in Newbury. I knew the street. I knew where I used to park. The house should have been there. I'm sure it was. But in some way it wasn't. I walked up and down. I asked neighbours. I even asked the postman. No one remembered her. No one. I thought somebody was going to say, yes, Pam Ball. I remember her. She was a little bit weird, wasn't she? A bit different, but I do remember her. But I stood there, not upset, not shocked, just still. Because I knew I had been there with Pam. And yet there was nothing. I sat back in the car, and without warning, those words came back to me. Go placidly amidst the noise and haste. And remember what peace there may be in silence. I hadn't known then what I was reading. I hadn't known those words had a name. They came from the Desiderata, and it left an impression on me for an awful long time. Well, an awful long time, even now. I hadn't needed to know, but in that moment I understood something I hadn't understood before. That not everything that shapes your life stays where you can find it. Some things arrive quietly, and they do their work, and they leave. I don't know what became of her, but I know who I became after I left that house. And it wasn't a year that meant nothing. It was a year that waited until I was ready to understand it. Not just a story, a remembrance. You may have had a year exactly like that. I think most of us have had a moment or a person that didn't seem important at the time. Something we overlooked, a conversation, a place, a decision so small it didn't feel like a decision at all. And yet later we realised that it mattered. We realised something shifted quietly without asking to be noticed. Perhaps you've met someone like that, someone who didn't look the part, didn't speak in the way you expected, didn't seem at the time to be offering anything particularly meaningful, and yet something stayed. Not because of what they said exactly, but because of how you felt in their presence, or what you began to see about yourself. And perhaps, like me, you didn't understand it fully then. Perhaps you even questioned it, wondered what you were doing, why you were there, and whether it was worth your time. But indeed, something kept you there just long enough. Long enough for something to settle or shift or begin. And only later, much later, you look back and think, that mattered. It really did matter. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that you could explain easily to someone else, but in a way that changed the direction of your life. Quietly, very quietly, almost invisibly. But no matter what things I have done in the years in between, the Desiderata has always come in, or I have made it part of my life. I don't remember really when I looked it up. It was the go placidly that kept resounding in my head, and one day I put just those words into a search, and there it was, the complete verse, the story behind it, and I don't ask of you, but please look it up and see if maybe those words might help you as much as they have helped me and left an impression on me. So before winding down, just for a moment, just rest and soften your gaze and allow yourself to think of a time, not necessarily a big moment, but something small that you might have almost overlooked, a place, a person, a conversation, something that didn't seem important at the time, and just sit with it. Not trying to analyse it, not trying to explain it, just noticing what comes. Perhaps nothing comes at all, and that's perfectly fine. But sometimes in the quiet, something returns. A feeling, a word, a sense of understanding that wasn't there before. And if that does happen, just let it be there. Without needing to hold on to it. Without needing to turn it into anything, because not everything arrives to be explained. Some things arrive just simply to be felt and understood when the time is right. And perhaps there are moments in your life too that didn't mean anything much at the time, but are still quietly waiting to be understood. Rest well. Until next time.